We need to understand something really important about our brain. Our brain does not care whether we're happy or sad. It doesn't care about making us joyful. It doesn't care about our goals, our wants, our hopes, our desires. It cares about one thing and one thing only. It cares about keeping you safe and alive. And when we understand this fact about our brain, we can start working with our brain and collaborating with it rather than the brain working against us. So let me explain a little bit more about the brain. There's two parts to the brain. There's the intellectual part of the brain, and this is the prefrontal cortex. It's the conscious part, it's the logical part, it's the part that you know as you, it's the part that you're engaging with now as you watch this video. Now, when we're in the intellectual part of the brain, that's where we feel brave, we feel motivated, we're in control. It's where we're able to make rational assessments and come up with rational answers and solutions based on a rational assessment of a situation. Now, there's another part to the brain, and this is the original part of our brain. It's our primitive brain. So it dates back to caveman times. So we have the primitive brain. As we've evolved and developed, we've lobbed on this intellectual part of the brain. Now, the primitive part of the brain, this is the subconscious part of the brain. And it just cares about keeping you safe and keeping you alive. The central, most influential bit of the brain is the amygdala, and you might have heard of that before. That's the fight, flight, freeze response, and it works closely with two other primitive parts of the brain, and that's the hypothalamus, which regulates all the chemicals in the body and in the brain, and the hippocampus, which stores all our templates of behaviors and actions and our routines. So this primitive part of the brain, it's our subconscious part, and it's run by our autonomic system, like our limbic system. So like how we naturally breathe and we don't have to concentrate on breathing or our heart beating. So it's the subconscious part. So when we're in this primitive part of the brain, this is where we can feel stressed, we can feel anxious, we can feel depressed. This is where we feel kind of quite emotional. It's also where we basically we can act a little bit irrationally, because when we're in that primitive part of the brain, we will not come up with rational answers and solutions to a situation. So let me give you an example of how the primitive brain works. Imagine that after watching this video, you decide to go for a walk, and you're walking down the street and you bump into a tiger. What would happen? Well, after you got over that initial shock of why on earth is there a tiger trotting down my street, the first thing that would happen is basically you'd get hot, you'd get sweaty, your stomach would churn, your heartbeat would speed up, and basically you'd be off like a shot. And in that situation, you'd be pleased because that's the correct response. If you see a tiger, you want to panic and run away. However, what happens is when we run our day-to-day lives, so when we get an unexpected bill, or when we feel overwhelmed or under additional pressure, or when we have an argument with somebody, our body thinks, our brain and our body responds as if we're face to face with a tiger. So it thinks that we're in a life-death situation. And yeah, it's not pleasant having an argument with somebody. It's not pleasant having an unexpected bill. But it's not the same thing as being faced with a life-death situation of a tiger. But our brain, and this is a key fact about our brain, it doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So when we start imagining things, so I could literally close my eyes and imagine being, I don't know, sat at a picnic table and in somewhere lovely like Canada where they have bears, and a bear coming along and trying to eat my lunch, and the sort of panic that would happen. Then literally I could, if I started closing my eyes and imagining that scenario, I would start getting hot, sweaty, my stomach would churn, because my brain would think that I'm actually in that situation. So our brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. And that's a lot of where stress and anxiety can be caused, because we're negatively forecasting the future. So for example, you've got a job interview to go to, or an important meeting with your boss to attend, or a presentation to deliver. And you know it's going to all be okay, but you start thinking of what could go wrong, and you start thinking 50 times of what could go wrong. You actually attend this meeting, this job interview, and it all goes perfectly well. But you've actually attended 51 meetings in total, 50 of which have been in your brain and you've imagined them and have been awful. And that's the power of our brain, how our brain can imagine and forecast a negative future, just like it can spend a lot of time getting stuck and ruminating on the past and focusing on all the negative things in our past. So when we understand the difference between our intellectual part of the brain and our primitive brain, and when we understand that our default mode is basically to always be on the lookout for danger, then we can understand why our brain is basically always kind of trying to keep us safe, keeping us alive, and it's not prioritizing our happiness, our joy, it's not prioritizing our goals and our dreams. So once we understand that fact, what can we do then? Well, one of the biggest things we can do is spend more time in our intellectual part of the brain, which, if you remember at the beginning of the video, I said when we're in that intellectual part of the brain, and that's where we feel brave, we feel happy, we're motivated. It's where we know what our goals are and we know what we should be doing to achieve those goals, and we follow through and do those things. So basically, if we want to be happier, and if we want to be a better version of ourselves, if we want to achieve a particular aspirational goal in our life, then we need to spend more time in that intellectual part of the brain, less time in this primitive part of the brain where we're constantly on high alert, we're constantly looking out for danger, we're constantly basically thinking that everything is a tiger. So, you know, that argument we've had with somebody, getting stuck in traffic and being late for work, it's being faced with a tiger. So yeah, we need to spend more time in the intellectual part of the brain. And when I work with clients, that's what we do. We spend the first part of the session, I talk about how the brain works, and I share tools and resources of how they can spend more time collaborating with their brain and in that intellectual part of the brain. We use what's known as positive talking therapy to move in that intellectual part of the brain. So one really simple tool that you can use is to focus on what's been good. What's been good about your day? So if you start feeling yourself getting stressed and anxious and nervous, just take 5 minutes to focus on what's been good. And I'm not talking about coming up with great, big, massive things. It can just be small things that have been good about your day. That first cup of tea in the morning. Perhaps it's been that there's been a bit of sunshine that day, or it's been a dry day and there's not been rain. Focus on things that have been good. And that naturally moves you into the intellectual part of the brain. And that's known, I talk a lot about the 3 Ps, and that's one of the 3 Ps. It's positive thoughts, focusing on positives. And it's not pretending that life's great, that we don't face challenges, that bad things haven't happened. It's focusing on the positives though. So what small things have been good about that day, about our week? What resources and tools have we developed and learned that have helped us overcome those challenges? So we can't control life, we can't control what challenges might be thrown at us, we can't control what other people do around us, but we can control how we respond to them, and we can build resources and tools, and we can, you know, take some time to actually congratulate ourselves on overcoming the challenges that we're facing. So yeah, what's been good is a really good question, or what you're grateful for. The other 2 Ps, so I said there's 3 Ps, so there's positive thoughts, positive actions. So that can be some kind of positive movement, could be exercise. Exercise is great for releasing the endorphins. It can also release serotonin and dopamine, so they're all the happy hormones that make you, happy chemicals that make you feel better. And positive interactions, so spending time with friends and family that are positive. So in a very digital world that we are in now, we do miss out on a lot of human connection. So it's spending time, so not being on the phone, not FaceTiming, but ideally being in person with somebody and spending time with them. And it's got to be positive interactions as well. So we might find that we have other people around us and it's not always positive interactions, or maybe they're sort of energy vampires. Spending more time with the people that make you feel good. So yeah, so once we understand, so going back to the beginning of the video, once we understand this key fact about the brain, that the brain doesn't care about your happiness, doesn't care about your goals, just cares about keeping you safe and alive. But once we then understand how we can calm our brain down, so I quite like to say to my brain, look, hold on, I've got this, calm down. I'm not face to face with a tiger. Yes, I'm stuck in traffic and I'm running late for an important meeting, but it's not the same as being faced with a tiger. So calm down, brain. I don't need to go into fight, flight, freeze response. I need to stay in my intellectual part of the brain where I'm going to be more rational, more calm, more balanced, more in control of my life. And that's where I will find that happiness and joy. It's where I'll be able to do the things I need to do to achieve the goals I want to achieve and be the person I want to be. So once we understand this about the brain, and we then can focus on doing more stuff to stay in that intellectual part of the brain. And I will share some more videos, some more tools where I talk more about the intellectual part of the brain and what we can do to, how we can prevent this fight, flight, freeze response taking over, and how we can spend more time in that intellectual part of the brain where we can basically empty that stress bucket and remain calm. So I hope you found this video helpful. Love to hear your thoughts, so do comment below. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. That really helps. And subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can access more videos. But comment below what your thoughts, what you're struggling with. Have you got any questions? And I can make some more videos answering those questions. Thank you for your time watching this video. Go and have an awesome day. Keep being awesome, keep being powerful, and I will see you soon with some more videos. Bye.